Okay. I'm John Leung, this is Jeff Hilland, and Hemal Shah took an early flight out, so he won't be here. The agenda is that I'll go over the Ultra Ethernet Consortium, and specifically the management working group, which Hemal and I co-chair. Short discussion about the way we're going to manage the Ultra Ethernet devices, because there's both a server endpoint for Ultra Ethernet, and there's also a switch as part of Ultra Ethernet. So we have two models for that, and they're call for action. Okay, the OCP Consortium is enhancing the general Ethernet both at the file layer and the transport layer. It's managing these capabilities that need to be addressed. So not only do you have to manage the Ethernet endpoint, but if it has any Ultra Ethernet capabilities, you have to go manage that. So what we didn't want to do was the existing transports and mechanisms, of course, don't address it. And as the capabilities come down from the rest of the Ultra Ethernet working groups as to what they're adding to the Ultra Ethernet interactions, then we have to go figure out exactly how it needs to be managed in order to set up the fabric and tilt the entire fabric up. So the working group was created as one of the verticals that went across all the layers to basically how do I manage everything from the transport layer up to and layers above that. So we're leveraging what we did as part of manageability was try to figure out what existing manageability exists out there, and let's build something on top of that instead of building something separate. Okay, so we're going to describe the unique manageability interfaces that UE needs. So the general approach when we did this was Redfish, which you've heard a lot about today, Yang, and then the Psi abstraction layer, which is actually also owned by OCP. So the only aspect here is Yang that we have to go talk to either IETF or OpenConfig to get that worked through. Okay, so since we've defined what the base manageability specifications need to be, is merely an exercise of identifying what the gaps are as the UE capability gets created, and then work with define what those extensions need to be, and then as a last point, go back and work with those organizations to make it part of their standard, so that we're still within the standard community and we don't do anything outside of that. Okay, and if we can go do implementations, we will go off and do that. So these are the management interfaces that we've identified. There's 5 of them. So the first 2 is both an in-band, out-of-band interface to do Redfish at the endpoint. There's Yang extensions that might be needed for the switch. So on the switch side, there is the Psi layer, and there's the vendor-specific layers. And then on the server side, there's the Redfish for out-of-band, and then there is an interface called in-band that we're not going to go talk about. So we've taken that out of scope. So we're going to manage this from an out-of-band perspective of before the fabric gets tilted up, what configurations do we need to make, what settings do need to be done before we tilt it up. And then after that, if you want to go in-band, you can. We may come back and address that if the industry wants it. So if I look at those 2, the way we define manageability is that there's a media layer, then there's a low-level layer of internal wiring. So a lot of discussion you've had today was on servers, NCSI, PLDM, so on and so forth, and then the top external layer which gets exposed out, which is Redfish. On the switch side, their onboard platform has a Psi layer, which is used to manage the platform, and their data model is a Yang model. So we have this kind of generic model on the left-hand side and how it is expressed either on a server or on a switch. This is a diagram I don't like because you can't read it. But what's in the center is the entire Ultra Ethernet stack model of everything from what's on the IP layer, what's on the file layer. And what the brackets show is those parts that we're trying to focus on. So where UE is 5 layers, we're only dealing with the low-level layers because those are the ones that you need to tilt up in order to get everything connected before you can bring this up. Okay.
So it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody in this room right now if you're doing Redfish extensions to some part of the model, you're probably going to want to do a profile as well. And so we're basically using that venue. And so that starts with the OCP profiles for the Redfish interface. Starting about, 7 years ago, we started doing profiles here in OCP for Redfish to do that interoperability and make sure you've implemented the properties and the objects, resources inside of Redfish and doing that in an interoperable way. And John here leads the OCP profiles workstream. And of course, there's a number of you in this room that are active as well as both of us. So you start with the hardware management baseline profile prescribed for common manageability. That's going to be the service endpoint. And then you start getting into the various platform-specific profiles, whether those be server, storage, or network, or whatever. So it's that profile that we're going to leverage for UE. So prescribing the UE NIC remote out-of-band manageability. Well, the E stands for Ethernet, right? So we've already got an Ethernet profile going through the approval process here in OCP. And so there's a part in the profile where you can base a profile on another profile. And so the root profile, if you will, is the OCP Ethernet NIC profile. It's got all the, uses the, what's the name of that thing? AC model, ACD? Yeah, the Advanced Communication Devices model, where you've got a network adapter and a network controller and map that to an Ethernet interface. There's ports, all of that, and it's all described in there. And so, at least for right now, there's only a couple of extensions, though we hope to add those as we go through the process of going through the different green layers you saw on the other slide. We'll extend those requirements into the profile. We'll add them to Redfish through the Alliance Partner Program, and develop a spec out of both the profile and the extensions as far as UE goes. So the way we do that is you start with a usage guide, you figure out what the use cases are, and then that's a document, and then there's also the profile itself, the machine readable profile that'll also generate a developer's spec, if you will, and that goes through and actually allows people to do automated testing with the profile, as well as make sure that they're reading the right documentation that goes along with it. And so basically Ultra Ethernet Consortium will extend the OCP NIC profile and then work with Redfish to get the enhancements into the Redfish specification. So what is a Ethernet NIC management? Go ahead, next one.
Yeah, the only comment I want to make was the diagram on the right is that right now, as Jeff mentioned, the OCP Ethernet NIC profile in its generic form is being released. And once it's released, it will be referenced by the server profile. And so you'll have a full entity where you can go test the server profile with a fully embellished NIC. Because today, if you look at the server profile, it's a very weak amount of manageability that you can do with the Ethernet endpoint. So this enhances at least that amount of manageability on an endpoint. And so it becomes a very easy step once we get there to go from there to Ultra Ethernet, because the Ultra Ethernet will just say, oh, you already have an Ethernet NIC. You just have to do these additional properties to manage yourself as an Ultra Ethernet endpoint.
You're going to have to wait for the UE profile, obviously, but the OCP NIC profile, you don't have to wait for the approval process. It's out there on the GitHub. If you want to see it and go test your implementation against it, don't wait for the approval. the one that's out there is the final one going through the approval process. Test with it now. So here's a list, and you know, it's pretty much what you would expect. What in the OCP Ethernet NIC profile, what are all the tasks you're expected to do? You know, it's get fru data, get config, get PCI, get all the NIC information, you know, and then there's a couple of things in there you want to be able to set as well. Some of the things on the port or the NIC or settings, you can reset it to default. All of those requirements are part of the Ethernet NIC profile and represented in the, well, part of the Ethernet NIC document and then represented in the profile. So the use case document is actually what drives what goes into the profile.
Right. So we've had some discussion about SUE during this conference, and right now the way we see it is, you know, the OCP Ethernet profile is the generic baseline. So we'll have a fragment that is Ultra Ethernet. If SUE has additional things that it needs to go set, it just becomes yet another fragment that can be added on top of this. So both of them can be, this becomes the baseline for both of them depending on, you know, what they need to configure.
Yep. And we haven't talked about ESUN yet, but I bet our answer is the same one there, right? You start with the Ethernet base profile and extend it from there. So.
Okay, so that's how we're going to manage the endpoint, and now we turn to the switch. So for the switch, there's the Yang model. We had started along a OpenConfig path, but decided to at that point to race back a bit because of the politics involved in Yang models. So what we wanted was a common set of Yang data models that were vendor neutral, and we could use to both configure and to manage the switch itself. So management protocols were defined and defined in Yang. And what we understood of the political process was that you create a Yang fragment, then you have to go to OpenConfig and say, will you add this? And then they require some specific documentation for them to map it into theirs. Then you go to IETF, which owns the overall Yang model, and you say, we want to submit an RFC, so you go extend your Yang model to go manage Ultra Ethernet Consortium. We want to do both. If there were yet another industry consortium around who does Yang models, we also want to go to them. These are the two that we've decided we need to go to once we've defined what the standard or generic set of Yang extensions that we want to go do. So the Yang model will handle streaming, so both push and pull streaming support of data, and there will be our test fixture behind this. So there's already one, I think, for OpenConfig, which will allow you to do testing. We're going to go port it to make sure that it incorporates and is able to test the Ultra Ethernet Yang models. And then the SI switch abstraction layer, which OCP owns within the networking project. Currently, it's exposed within the OpenConfig wiki, and I believe the extensions are being slowly added. Based on they first have to be approved by the Ultra Ethernet Consortium before they can go out and get it created. Okay, so the switch layer is purely the formation is purely a number of C libraries that get added to the abstraction layer library itself. And this shows you exactly what the extensions are. It's extended for the PHY, the CSIG, which is congestion management. So the second line shows you all the kind of extensions that are being added by the Ultra Ethernet Consortium and how they will get added into the port model of PSI. Okay, and so call to action, UEC is yet a separate organization. It's got a management work group, which I said I chair. So we're having all these discussions. Currently, we've released, the UEC has released 1.0 spec as of late last year. They will release 1.1, hopefully first time in next year. And that will have a lot of the of the data as far as manageability. So manageability was started at the beginning of this year in order to get collateral to add into 1.1. Okay? So watch for the submittal of the Redfish profile and into the profile workstream, and then the SI extensions that were going into the SI implementation within OCP. Okay? And that is it.
With that, we've got about 6 minutes left for questions, if anybody has any.
On the Yang slide you had, you said you want to define a new gRPC protocol. You mentioned OpenConfig, but are you looking at GNMI, which is already there, or are you looking at creating an entirely new construct?
We're planning to use what's already there.
Okay, so that would be GNMI. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, leverage the ecosystem that exists, right? It's kind of the overall theme in this
Well,
presentation.
what we find in manageability is there's a manageability framework. People build the tool chains to it, and to get them off of it is very difficult, especially when the new thing does the same thing the old thing did. They ask, why?
Agree. Implementations win, yes.
Right. Implementations exist. Legacy works.
Any other questions?
Okay?
All right, well,
Well,
thank
thank
you very
you.
much.